Well, here we are yet again, lords, ladies, dragons, and all other entities, to Fire Emblem February. This is the annual tradition on this channel where we talk about a certain Nintendo strategy RPG that involves heroism, swords, bad RNG, and the occasional shipping. Normally for this series I pick a theme and run with it for the whole month, and this year is no different, but rather than doing reviews on main games in the series or fan-made creations like I've done in the past, this year I just wanted to focus on a specific category of favorites in various aspects of the series. True, I've said before that I'm not fond of making favorite lists of things, although I have done a few in the past, but at the same time, I find it fun to sometimes sit down and revisit certain features that I enjoy in a series. So, to kick things off, we're going to talk about my favorite support conversations in the series. For a quick refresher, if you're new here, or maybe you just stumbled in from watching something else that's completely unrelated, thanks for all the views on the Phantasy Star Online video, by the way. Fire Emblem is a game that gives you command over an entire army of anime-faced individuals that all have their own unique strengths, weaknesses, personalities, and tragic backstories. One of the ways the game explores those avenues is through the use of support conversations between two characters in your army. These conversations are a great way to flesh out characters, in addition to providing a boost in combat when the two units fight near each other. It's also another way to make you feel extra guilty when you let one of them die due to your negligence as a sloppy commander. Or maybe the game was just a dick and decided to kill them outside of your control. For added flavor, support conversations can sometimes end with two characters falling in love and getting married. So rejoice, you little shippers! Your fanfics don't have to be non-canon anymore, unless you just really want to stretch the imagination. I love support conversations, the gameplay aspect. It's one of the things about Fire Emblem that's always stood out to me compared to other strategy RPGs. So, for this video, we're just going to be talking about a few of my favorite supports in the series in no particular ranking or order. Keep in mind, these aren't necessarily going to be all romantic supports, but several of them will be. And while the shipping simulator is something that people have come to enjoy about Fire Emblem, myself included, it's not the core aspect of every single support in the series. But hey, if you want to write fics on why you think your favorite characters should kiss, nobody's gonna stop you. Fire Emblem The Blazing Blade was the first Fire Emblem game to make it to Western shores in an official capacity. The game was standard Fire Emblem flair, with tons of anime-ass looking characters fighting in a war together, bonding closer with their equally attractive army members. To reuse a joke from another video, being in a Fire Emblem army is basically being at anime singles night. Find a lord or lady that you fancy, provided they are a specific character on your list, and have a few conversations with them to get a happy ending after the war, assuming you live. And also, don't accidentally speak to too many other people. As you might expect though, at every party there's a stickler who wants to dictate how people are having fun. They're trying to kill the vibe by saying nonsense like, "Guys, there's anti-fraternization policies," or "Guys, this is really unprofessional," or "Guys, we're here to fight dragons, not bed them." What a maroon. Anyway, that guy in this case is Kent, the straight-laced chivalrous knight that makes up the Christmas Cavalier duo in this game. Kent is meant to serve as the foil to his more laid-back and Casanova wannabe counterpart, Sain, and as such, he comes across as a bit stuffy at times. Despite that attitude, Kent actually has multiple possible romantic support options, including fan-favorite Lady Lindis herself. But the one I want to focus on today is with the eldest sister of the game's Pegasus trio and the other resident stick in the mud, Fiora. As the eldest sister of her family, Fiora has also taken it upon herself to be the responsible one. Given that both knights have their heir responsibility and pride, Kent and Fiora meet and realize that they're the only ones at this party who are not exuding anime horniness, and as thus, actually have a lot in common and decide to get to know each other better. By their B support, Kent and Fiora have now realized that not only are they both clearly the only rational, responsible members of this army, but everyone else in this army is getting a little too friendly on and off the battlefield. Kent and Fiora decide that something needs to be done about this. So, Kent wants to draft up a formal complaint to his superiors, but wants some help from Fiora ironing out the details of these guidelines. Fiora agrees to help, and the two realize that this might work best if they drafted together, off the battlefield, alone, possibly at night with some nice refreshments. After all, trying to draft an end to the sex can be quite famishing. In fact, it seems that it's going to be a cold night. Perhaps we should light a few candles for some extra warmth, don't want to catch a cold. And then, buy their A support. This support is just cute and funny. It doesn't reveal some deep, dark backstory secret about either character involved, but it is short, sweet, and provides a good laugh of the two local prudes trying to stop each other from the sex, but then ending in a way that implies they may have fallen victim to their own passions and desires. It also ends in a pretty sweet way, with the two declaring to always stay close to one another and to stay together after the war ends. The two prudes fell in love in the end. Although, given Kent's nature, it's possible that after seeing Fiora naked, he just feels like there was no other road to take here other than marrying her. Fire Emblem has always been a series where characters come together from all walks of life, but Three Houses had its own interesting take for the series by making those different walks of life take place in a high school setting. In all seriousness, the subject of nobility, peasantry, and lineage is a prevalent topic in Three Houses. Some characters view nobility as not only a God-given right, but a call to responsibility, to lead by example, and to use their status to help their communities, instead of just lording their titles over those lesser than them. Ferdinand von Eyre is one such character. Ferdinand, honestly, is probably one of my favorite characters in Three Houses. He's kind, loyal, dumb as hell, and drinks respect women juice. The mobile game, Fire Emblem Heroes, gives him the moniker of noblest of nobles, which really fits pretty well, I'd say. And then there's other nobles, like Marianne, who has werewolf depression. A lot of Ferdinand support chains start the same way. He stumbles upon one of his classmates who are just minding their own damn business, and he says, "Hark! Did you know that being a noble rules?" And then they get understandably annoyed at his unchecked privilege, and he spends the rest of the support chain trying to come to a point of understanding with the other character to certain hilarious and heartwarming degrees. Ferdinand and Marianne support is no different. It starts out rather awkwardly with Ferdinand approaching Marianne and basically tells her that as a noble, she should really stop being a cryptid weirdo and act more confident. It's her duty as a noble to inspire others. Yeah, Ferdinand, basically saying, "Hey baby, smile more," is sure to work. Later, Ferdinand seems to realize that maybe he didn't approach the previous conversation with a lot of tact and tries to make amends, but still goes the line of thought that, "Hey Marianne, being a noble is what you are, right? I mean, sure, you're a minor noble or whatever, but that's okay." And Marianne basically responds about as well as you would expect. Somehow, having a cursed lineage really isn't something that Marianne's thrilled about, and Ferdinand can't seem to grasp as to why not everyone is jazzed about the families that they belong to. Not everyone is heir to an influential dukedom. Some people might just turn into monsters when they get older. And then we time skip 5 years later, where the two talk about their previous conversation from when they were teenagers, because apparently they haven't spoken in all that time, and holy crap, can you imagine if you went up to someone you hadn't seen since high school and was like, "Hey, remember that time you farted in the cafeteria in front of your crush? Good times. Anyway, we're in the middle of the war, and I killed my homeroom teacher last night." Ferdinand and Marianne talk a bit more on their convo from before, with Ferdinand trying to convey his feelings properly, basically saying that it's not just that he thinks that being a noble means that they must be held to a higher stature, but if Marianne does nothing but curse her existence instead of trying to find her true purpose, then she'll never be able to properly live and fulfill any purpose in her life. Marianne takes this line of thinking much better than before, possibly because Ferdinand didn't come across as a man who is dumb of ass this time, but also possibly because the two are older now and have had more time to reflect. By their final support conversation, Marianne has come to appreciate Ferdinand's words and taken a new outlook on life, and appreciating that someone can believe that even she, a supposed cursed creature, can have a purpose in life. She even throws in a smile, which for someone like Marianne is kind of a big deal. The resolution to this whole conversation is just really sweet, and I like the dynamic these two have a lot. Ferdinand is someone that, while lacking tact, means well and wants his friends to be happy and live their best life. He often puts his foot in his mouth due to ignorance or privilege, but he's open to learning and hearing out what people are feeling. And then there's Marianne, who feels like her very existence is a curse and there's no reason for her to even try at anything. But eventually she realizes that life is what she makes of it and is able to overcome that doubt. Their paired ending is also hilariously sweet. If you keep the two together, they'll get married and work together to restore Ferdinand's family territory. Ferdinand also loves his werewolf wife so much that he commissions a bronze statue to honor her achievements. But naturally, Marianne has it removed and hidden away in storage. Strong of heart, dumb of ass. That's how we like our heroes here. Given that Fire Emblem is a series where lots of different folks with different backgrounds fall in love while fighting together, it makes sense that the series plays with various different romance tropes as well. Friends to lovers, enemies to lovers, tropes that really shouldn't be a thing in the first place. The games are also fond of star-crossed fairy tale romances, stories where the gallant knight saves the dainty waif and the two realize that they're totally perfect for each other despite their radically different backgrounds and should be in love despite only having known each other for like a week. Maybe even shorter, looking at you, Sigurd. Blazing Blade played pretty heavily with that as well, with the main character Eliwood clearly having a strong connection with Ninian, the aforementioned dainty waif. Ninian is even canonically in love with Eliwood, and it's pretty easy to have the two end up together. It's for many reasons in addition to these that it's often interpreted that Ninian is the canonical love interest for Eliwood to choose. But I don't really give a shit about that because I like Lyn and Eliwood more. I don't have a problem with Ninian and Eliwood's romance. In fact, I do find it very sweet, and I'm pretty sure I paired them the first time I played Blazing Blade because it felt like the proper choice. But as I've played other games and replayed this one, I've come to realize that I like Lyn and Eliwood's support path and ultimate marriage a lot more than their other pairings. Lyn and Eliwood supports are not overflowing with any sort of romantic undertones, aside from Eliwood being a bit oblivious when he calls Lyn beautiful at one point, but then clarifies he meant her swordplay. Real smooth. But their supports are, well, supportive. Lyn confides in Eliwood about her new position as a noble and how hard the transition from the free plains nomad she was to the ruling aristocrat has been on her. She's a stranger in a strange land. She's not your stereotypical female noble and wonders if she'll embarrass her grandfather or her late mother by just being who she is. But Eliwood's able to convince her that all of those things about her upbringing and heritage are what makes her special and strong, and that's why she's gonna be just fine in this new position. The support ends in a mostly platonic manner, but at the end of the game, Eliwood and Lyn will get married and Lyn will give birth to Roy if they have an A support. There's not an overt declaration of I love yous between the two during their support, but the fact that they decide to get married after all it's said and done seems to suggest that those feelings blossomed in a natural way and they were drawn together. Or maybe they just got married for political or tax reasons, who to say? I think the reason I like the Eliwood and Lyn pairing over their other ones is just that it feels very down to earth and sweet to me. It's a support where two people realize that falling in love with your best friend, the person you trust the most in the world and who understands you better than anyone else, and who, unfortunately, is not Hector, is actually pretty awesome. Romance doesn't always have to be conflict and strife and overcoming each other's glaring flaws and horrible backstories. Sometimes you just fall in love with someone you care a lot about because you're comfortable around them and they make you feel safe. And also they happen to be really hot. On the Blue Lion's Path and 3 houses, the player will encounter 2 of their students known as Ashe and Dedue. Ashe is a perfect cinnamon roll who is too good for this world, and Dedue is basically the exact same thing, but also serves as the game's allegory for racism. Ashe and Dedue's support opens up with Dedue offering Ashe some tips about his cooking, up until Dedue finally stops and says, "Hey, hold on a moment, why are you hanging out with me? What is your deal? Ashe is initially confused at this line of questioning, but eventually comes out that Dedue is confused as to why anyone from Ferdinand would want to be friends with someone from Duscur after that whole assassination of the royalty thing. But Ashe assures Dedue that he doesn't really care about that. After all, he was poor. That's basically the same thing, right?
No.
By their B support, Ashe has continued down this path of wanting to be good buddies with Dedue, and unlike most situations like this, Dedue actually decides to humor him as the two go into more detail of their feelings on how people are treating Dedue because of the whole Duscur situation. Dedue admits that he's weary of all these negative stereotypes that people are saying about him and the people of Duscur, and Ashe admits that he, too, embarrassingly, kind of bought into those stereotypes until he actually got the chance to speak to Dedue one-on-one. He realized that this stoic mountain of a man was actually a really nice guy and an impressive cook, and now he wants to be friends. He also requests that Dedue make him some more fine Duscur cuisine sometime, much to Dedue's bemusement. Like all the A supports, Ashe and Dedue's final conversation takes place after the 5-year time skip when the continent has erupted into full-scale war. Ashe returns from a mission, and Dedue offers to cook for him, finally presenting the Duscur cuisine that Ashe had requested 5 years ago. During the meal, the two reminisce on how they learned to cook so well in the first place, with Ashe and Dedue both admitting that they learned by watching and cooking with their families who are no longer with them. However, both men also reflect that by cooking, they're able to put the memories of their loved ones into their work, and in a way, their memories are able to live on through them. This leads to them also musing over how their lost companions and loved ones can live on through them and their other actions as well. The conversation ends on a bittersweet note, as Dedue cautions Ashe not to oversalt his dinner.
Dedue, your cooking is delicious. It really is.
Careful, or you will oversalt it.
It's all right. Thank you, Dedue.
This support is just good. It's just really good. It almost drove me to tears the first time I witnessed it. It helps that the voice acting is also incredibly well done, and it makes me wish that some older games got the Echoes treatment to be remade with new voice acting and direction. Ashe and Dedue have both gone through so much at this point in their lives, but despite it all, they are able to find the strength to keep fighting for the people they love and also for those that they've lost. This support is perfect. It was so good that even though I was a bit upset that Ashe accidentally fought too close to Dedue on the final map of the Blue Lions campaign and ended up with him instead of Ingrid, who I'd been trying to ship him with, I ultimately got over it because the two of them opening a restaurant together and their ending was so sweet. Still gonna headcanon that he married Ingrid, though. Hey, maybe they're poly. You don't know. You don't know what they put in their stew. Fire Emblem Path of Radiance is probably my favorite entry in the series. Not just because it was the first Fire Emblem I ever played, but also because I just consider it to be a really good game. It's fun to play, has a great story, and also great characters. Surprisingly enough, despite having a support mechanic, it's also one of the few post-Kaga period games where supported characters do not get married, which I guess makes sense when you consider that the sequel, Radiant Dawn, was the true wrap-up to the Tellia series, and so that one did have marriage despite not having traditional supports. In light of all that, my favorite support from Path of Radiance is not romantic, unless you want to see it that way, in which case have at it, I'm not going to stop you. One of Tellius' central themes is prejudice and racism, mainly between the standard humans known as Bjorks and the furry humans known as the Lagoos. Naturally, in your quest to obtain peace over a continent-wide war and standard Fire Emblem tradition, you end up recruiting several army members from both sides of the conflict and from the various nations on the continent. And also, as you would expect, several of them have supports with each other where they discuss their different experience in a world of fantastical racism. Lethe and Jill are two characters of a similar nature despite being from different backgrounds. Both are proud soldiers who have a strong sense of pride for their country, and both hate the other's race with a fiery passion at first. Neither of them initially really want to be in Ike's army either, but they are there anyway out of a sense of duty to their kingdoms. In Lethe's case, because she's been ordered to, and Jill's case because she flew ahead of her squad without thinking her plan all the way through. Eventually, after spending a little time in Ike's army, Jill starts to get curious about all these furries mulling about and realizes they're not quite like the horrible monsters she's been raised to believe. They actually look a little cuddly. Curious as to why this is, she approaches one such monster and asks her an important question. She asks why do Legoos hate Bjork so much? Lethe counters with her own question. Why do Bjork hate Legoos so much? And Jill answers, well, I mean, 'cause you're the enemy, man, right? Nailed it! Okay, so this naturally doesn't end well, and yet for some reason, Jill decides that she still needs to get to the bottom of this conundrum, so later she approaches Lethe again, who miraculously decides to hear her out. Jill lets Lethe know that all of her life in Dayan, she and her fellow Bjork had been told the Legoos were just horrible beasts that attacked Bjork on sight indiscriminately, but now seeing Ike and the others fight alongside Lethe, she knew that wasn't true. So she wanted to try and figure out just how they had reached this point and why the Legoos hated the Bjork so. Lethe gives Jill a quick history lesson, and by quick, I mean this B support conversation is like the longest one in the game or something, holy crap, of how long ago the Bjork and Legoos lived in harmony. But all of that changed when the Bjork decided the Legoos were subhuman and attacked, forcing the Legoos to flee to parts of the continent where they could just live isolated, assuming they weren't captured and sold into slavery first. It's a horrific tale, and one that Jill isn't sure how to respond to, so Lethe tells her to not respond, and just reflect on what she'd heard and learned. The Bjork have a bloody history with the Legoos, and Jill needs to confront that. Otherwise, Lethe has no more patience for her. Sometime later, Jill approaches Lethe again to wrap up their support, and an interesting tidbit of this conversation actually references something that happens during the main story. During the main story, Ike's army will pass through Jill's hometown and face her father. Ultimately, there's no way to peacefully talk Jill's father down, as his people will suffer Ashnar's wrath if he betrays the King of Dayan. Actually, in a cruel twist of events, you can actually lose Jill in this chapter if you're foolish enough to have her try and talk to her father, and you haven't built up a reasonable support between her and another army member. Like, seriously, how did you think that was going to go? Lethe will express bewilderment that Jill went so far as to kill her own father instead of turning on her Legoos allies. Jill explains that her decision to chase after Ike and the others was out of a sense of duty or for glory for Dayan, and it wasn't until later that she realized that she needed to think independently and decide for herself if fighting and hating the Legoos is what she should be doing. In the end, she realizes that it was important to stand by Ike and the Legoos, even if it meant defying her father. Lethe empathizes with Jill's decision and even requests to shake Jill's hand because it's a sign of friendship. It's a symbolic resolution to what could become of the Bjork and the Legoos. This support is honestly fairly standard in this type of story. Two races coming together and realizing they're ultimately not that different, and in the end cast aside their racism to become friends. But even if it is cliche, I like the support a lot. Lethe and Jill are able to come to an understanding and become friends despite everything they've gone through. That's some good old serotonin if you ask me. I also like it because it helps explore an important avenue of racism that sometimes gets overlooked, that it's institutionalized. Jill believes that Legoos are monsters because that's what she's been raised to believe. It's what the kingdom instills into its citizens from a young age, and it's something she's never questioned because she's never been in a position where she really needed to think for herself and face this enemy like another living creature and not some boogeyman in the dark. The only way that Jill's able to properly break free of that conditioning is to not only spend time with one of these so-called monsters she's heard about, but also to actually learn her people's own history and empathize with why the Legoos might not really like the Bjork that much either. It's an old moral lesson, but it's a good one and one that's important. Fire Emblem has some good and bad supports, but today I put out some of my favorites. There's other supports I like too, some that I may even consider making honorable mentions someday, but maybe that's another video for another time. We've still got some more Fire Emblem February coming up though, so thanks for watching, and stay tuned.
Good morning to you, Marianne.